Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every Wednesday so you could be prepared to win the battle for business. That's right. Now, I know you're out there. You're closing deals. You're making money. You're turning prospects into profits. So I got to make it worth your while. That's why I have on the kinds of guests that you can listen, learn, and earn from. Today's guest, no exception. It happens to be me. That's right. So, hey, thanks for sharing some of your time with me today. And as always, a special thanks to our sponsors, Corbett Public Relations. They've been promoting and protecting businesses and brands for over 30 years. So please visit Bill and his team at CorbettPR.com. That's CORBETT PR.com. So welcome aboard, everybody. Now, today I'd like to talk about competition. And I'm going to share with you what I think is a rather unique story. And it is the story of my own son, Magnus, who's 13 years old, and he's in a local travel baseball team. And they just got back from a national tournament in Branson, Missouri. And he learned some rather amazing lessons on competition. The same lessons that he learned are the very lessons that you could apply to your business today as you continue on your journey to winning the battle for business. So what I'd like to start off with is, first of all, a huge thank you to the coaches of my son's team. They're a great group of guys, and they're super dedicated, and they're doing whatever they can to encourage the kids to be their best, to learn and to grow as athletes and as young teenagers, if you will. So one of the ideas that the coaches had for the team this year was to enter them into a national tournament in Branson, Missouri. Now, it's a kind of tournament that features both local teams, such as my son's, and national teams. And that's an important distinction because we are talking about competition today. Now, again, my son is on a local team. So what does that mean if you're unfamiliar with travel baseball? A local team typically can recruit from the 3 or 4, maybe 5 towns in the basic area surrounding the team. A national team is just that. They're national, and they get to recruit from kids all around the country. So they're literally recruiting the best of the best. And some of these teams literally just play in these tournaments. And they typically have some amazing practice facilities. And the teams in the South, particularly Florida and Georgia, Texas, and even on the West Coast in California, they also have an advantage to teams in the Northeast and New York because they play year-round. Where the teams here on Long Island, they lose about 4 months a year where they can't play on the field because obviously it's too cold. Now, I know what you're thinking, and I'm thinking the same thing. You're like, Tim, this is beginning to sound like excuses. And listen, hey, I hate excuses as much as the next person. But we are talking about competition. And what you want to do is you want to size up your competition. You want to study the competition. You want to know what kind of resources they have. Because you know what? Sometimes you can't always match their resources, but you have to know that and embrace it and get around it any way you can. So if you are a big fish in a small pond currently, perhaps now is the time. And after listening to today's show, I might encourage you to have the courage to start swimming in a bigger pond with bigger fish. Because after all, do we really get a sense of how good we are if we don't go head-to-head with the competition? And not just the local competition, but the national competition. And that's exactly what my son's team did. And again, credit to the coaches. They wanted the team to see and to get an experience playing local and national competition from around the country. And it was an eye-opening experience. So this is what happens. Let me begin to tell you the story. Now, again, as I tell the story, please keep in mind, I am a proud dad, so just remember that. So they're out in Branson, Missouri. The tournament is at a field that's called Ballparks of America. Now, if you're a 13-year-old boy who loves baseball, this is like you've died and gone to baseball heaven. They have replica fields. They have a replica field of the old Brooklyn Dodger Stadium. They have a replica of where the Cardinals play, Chicago Cubs. They have a number of fields like that. So you're playing on some amazing-looking stadiums. Let me just kind of set the backdrop. So the tournament is underway, and my son's team plays the first 2 games, and they win both games. So they're feeling fantastic. The coaches are fist pumping. They're excited. They're feeling awesome. The parents are super happy. Life is good. So we start off the tournament 2-0. Great place to be. Then we get to our 3rd game, and we lost it 2-0. Ugh. Listen, losing is losing, and it stinks no matter how you look at it. But in all fairness, it was a pitcher's duel. It could have gone either way, but we lost. Again, tough fought game. So now in the tournament, the team is 2-1. So what happens next is where the lessons in competition for my son and his teammates and all of us, quite frankly, begins. The next team was a national team, and these were kids that are out of Southern California. And we lost this next game. And we didn't just lose it, but we got crushed. They beat us 15-0. The lineup was absolutely stacked. These kids were hitting missiles into the gaps. Now, if you're not familiar with baseball, the gaps are essentially the parts of outfield that are between center and left field and center and right field. So when you hit a missile line drive, it's really, really hard to make a play on those balls. And player after player in their lineup was hitting awesome shots. The number 8 kid in the lineup, who typically is not your strongest hitter, that's why they got him down at number 8, that kid hit a grand slam. So, again, needless to say, 15-0, we got crushed. The boys were dejected, obviously, but that's baseball, win some, lose some. So it's what happens next, again, as I said, is where the real lessons begin. So the team heads off. They get a little bit of a late breakfast as they head off to their next game. And as I said, this is a great facility out in Branson, Missouri, Ballparks of America. So I decided in between the games, let me just wander around, let me see what's going on, maybe check out some other games. And what I saw next was quite amazing. The team that beat my son 15-0, so their bats were on fire. They were in the facility. The facility had batting cages set up, obviously for all the teams to practice, right? So I'm walking past these batting cages, and I see the team that just crushed my son's team. And I look in, and the rest of the cages are empty, except for about 6 kids from this team. So now I'm curious. Again, we're talking about competition. What makes them so good? Well, I'm beginning to find out. So I see these kids, and I don't see a coach, and that's what gets me curious. So I go up to them, and I introduce myself as, hey, guys, you know what? I'm one of the dads from the team you just beat early this morning. And they were all very nice, very humble. They said hello. And I asked them, I said, you guys got a coach here today? You just, in here, doing some BP. And I said, yeah, we're just doing BP. And they actually had one of the kids pitching to the other kids. So that was what really caught my attention. It was amazing. These kids, seemingly on their own, were in the cages doing batting practice after having beaten a team 15-0. They weren't off celebrating that I saw. They weren't having ice cream to celebrate the victory. I was getting a sense that this team was able to bring a sense of winning to this tournament. They came to win. And not just that, they were willing to do what most other teams aren't willing to do. And it was pretty amazing. So that caught my attention for sure. So the day goes on, and later that day, I'm hanging out talking to one of the coaches outside of my son's team barracks. Each team in this complex had their own barracks. It was a really cool setup. So we're just outside talking baseball, and as it so happens, the team from Southern California is in the barracks right next to my son's team. So at first, I'm not paying much attention. They all come out. I guess, they were all dressed. They had their uniforms. They had their bat bags. They were ready to go. But then what caught my attention was that they were standing in single file, waiting outside their dorm. And they had one coach at the end of the line. And I'm going to assume he was probably an assistant coach. And they were in single file. They weren't horsing around. They weren't joking. They were standing in single file. The coach in the back said, hey, we just got to wait head coach didn't get his name. He'll be out in a minute. So a minute or so goes by, and the head coach comes out, and he goes to the front of the line. And real simply says, guys, we ready? And they said in unison, ready to go. And they walk in single file to their next game. So I've never heard of this team before. There's tons of teams, hundreds of teams, thousands of teams, thousands certainly, all around the country. And I could observe their skills in the game that they played against my son's team. And listen, they were great baseball players. Really sharp fielding, great hitting. But the lessons on competition weren't so much what they did on the field, but what they were doing off the field. And like I said, half a dozen kids were at batting practice on their own. When they were going to the next game, they were standing single file. It was discipline. They weren't joking around. They weren't messing around. They were ready to go to the next game. They were ready to win. And by the way, when they did, this team won the entire tournament, a tournament of, I believe, it was 26 teams. So this is the kind of competition my son Magnus and his teammates were seeing. It's not the kind of competition that we had here in Long Island. And again, before the tournament, my son's team is 12-4, so they're having a really good year, a year they should absolutely be proud of. So they won the first two games, lost the third, and then they went into the meat grinder of this team that they lost 15-0. So what ends up happening? There were moments of this tournament that every player of the team should be absolutely proud of. Every kid on the team, and I mean every kid, hit a clutch hit at one point or another in this tournament. Every player on the team made some amazing play in the infield and the outfield. Quite frankly, plays that would make a highlight reel on ESPN. And again, I know I'm a biased dad, but they played their asses off, and they should absolutely be proud. But I have to think one of the absolute highlights of the tournament was they got into the semifinals. And they were playing this team, and they were down 5-1 going into the final inning. Now, if you know baseball, 5-1, final inning, not a great place to be. You're playing from behind. It's not easy. But this is what impressed me most about the boys and about the coaches. Nobody on that team quit. And I mean, not a single player. They strung together walks and singles and doubles. And they rallied for 8 runs. Yes, 8 runs in the last inning. They won the semifinal game 9-5. So talk about complete elation and just complete pride in your son and his teammates and the coaches. That to me was one of the highlights of the tournament. And not just that, also, one of the boys entered the home run derby on our team, and he placed third. So another amazing accomplishment. So if you are that big fish in the small pond, it can make you feel great. It can give you a great sense of pride and ego. But are you ever really challenging yourself? Are you ever really putting yourself in a position to find out just how good you are? And I would say no. If you're not willing to go up against whatever is the greatest competition in your industry, if you're not willing to dive into the deep end of that big pond, then I'd say you're not giving yourself that fair chance. And yeah, you know what? You may get your ass kicked. That's what happens. But you know what? You need to be humble enough to leave your ego at the door and learn from the competition, as my son's team did. Because now I know my son and his teammates and the coaches, they saw competition on a completely different level. Now they all know just how good they can be if they really want it bad enough. And they know how good they have to be if they want to compete at that next level. So they came home from the tournament. They won their first 2 games back. The kids are on fire. And again, my hat's off to the coaches. They dedicate a ton of time to my son and his teammates. I've seen tremendous growth in my son and the team this year. And it's just amazing where I get to be a part of a great family experience, a great vacation, a baseball vacation in the heart of America at Branson, Missouri. And then I reflect upon it, as the host of the Profit Express. And I realize, wow, how much I really learned from my son and his teammates and coaches about how you have to have the courage to go up against great competition. And when you do, you're rewarded if you're smart enough to learn. And I know my son, his team, and his coaches did just that. So again, super proud of each and every one of them. So thank you for your time today. Thanks for being on board the Profit Express as always. And to watch out every Wednesday for great shows like today's show so you can continue on the journey to winning the battle for business. And I'll say one last thing until next time, and that is, let's go Giants! Until next Wednesday, it's the Profit Express.